kind of a similar version with Champion of the Parish that we've seen in the feature match area before. He has 4 copies of Tragic Clip, 4 copies of Gather the Townsfolk, and 4 copies of Brimstone Volley, which is a card that we've been seeing people play, but they've been kind of playing 2, maybe 3, but he's playing full 4 copies, so he's a very aggressive version.
Yeah, Richard Nguyen is playing Jund Aggro, a deck I've seen him playing for a few opens now, and it's interesting. I don't believe he's actually notched a top 8 with this deck yet. And he's actually most known for playing the Naya deck that actually, you wound up winning a little tournament with not too long ago. So it's kind of surprising to me he hasn't returned to Naya, given that it's had some successful finishes in the hands of a number of people. This Jund Aggro deck he's playing, it's interesting. Has access to Falconwrath Aristocrat, and then mostly just good cards that also get played in like Naya and green-red decks. So that's the big selling point. Also gains Doomblade, which is a hefty removal spell in the format right now. Not at its best against Luis Alfonso, however.
Yeah, and honestly, Jund Aggro is one of those decks where if it gets its mana, it plays some of the more powerful creatures like Falconwrath Aristocrat, Thundermoon Hellkite, very aggressive type creatures. But again, red, green, black can be difficult on your mana sometimes, and Richard's on a mulligan here to 6, so we're going to see if he can beat Luis Alfonso, which is probably already a kind of a worse bad matchup for him. And it looks like did Richard actually mulligan to 4 cards? Yeah, so quite the aggressive mulligan for Richard here.
Hey, I'm impressed he opened on Stomping Ground with sort of 4 cards. Like, that's pretty grim.
So fortunately for Richard here, Luis has a pretty slow start, just double Sacred Foundry.
Stomping Ground Dragon Skull Summit? This kid is charmed.
Doesn't look like he's got much else going on though.
No, it looks like lands and Bonfire of the Damned. I don't think he has another spell in his hand.
Luis has a Cavern. We'll tell you what he's naming there, but
Human.
Human. Good read there. So names Human on the Cavern, so he's able to cast his Doom Necromancer, or rather, Zathrid Necromancer. That comes down now, and Richard again doesn't have access to black mana right now, but I believe in his hand he does.
Yeah, if he peels if his spell here isn't relevant, it's like actually starts getting to the point where you might want to consider conceding to avoid, showing the fact that you're black. Like things like that start mattering. Like he's holding the black land, and I think that's one of the reasons why here.
I agree with you. I think especially if a Falconwrath Aristocrat comes down on Luis' side of the board, it's very difficult for the Jund Aggro deck to kind of beat an Aristocrat.
Yeah,
so.
I would be willing to scoop it up at this point. He has no way to remove these guys from the board. The top card of his deck is clearly not a creature. Looking at his list, there's not a spell in the deck that would be good in this situation either.
He's got a Bonfire in his hand, but again, there is a human Necromancer in play, so Aristocrat's going to get a +1 counter, and you're still going to get a zombie in play.
His best case scenario actually is this is a Miracle Bonfire, because that would leave Luis with just a 5/2 Falconwrath Aristocrat when all was said and done. But that's still pretty bad.
Yeah. So let's see what Richard decides to do here. I agree with you. I mean, obviously you never want to concede
when you can win,
but when you could potentially still win the match. But I think he's pretty far behind, and not giving away any information to your opponent can make it very difficult for them to sideboard. So I agree with you. Not letting him know that you have black in your deck might be a big deal, but at this late in the tournament, there's still a chance that they've sat next to each other. If they're both 6-1, there's a chance that Luis already knows what he's playing anyway. So let's see what he does here. Deciding to what he wants to do. I think he's thinking about conceding. I'm with you.
I'm pretty sure he has Bonfire of the Damned and lands in his hand, so I don't know what else he could think about.
So he's just gonna Bonfire to 1, force Luis to sacrifice a creature here.
Yep. Luis responds, generates a zombie token, and gains a 5/2.
And is he gonna play the black source here?
I think he's just going to play the Sacred Foundry.
So he's
right?
no, he's got a Blood Crypt. So this game's going to go on for a little bit longer. We'll see how much longer, though, with an Aristocrat and a zombie in play. And now it looks like Luis has a land. And Luis has plenty of other gas to follow this up, too.
At least a Champion and Gather the Townsfolk, plus a Brimstone Volley.
Wow. So, he's going to close this game out pretty quickly.
He's just going to kill Richard next turn.
Yeah. And honestly, Richard holding back the black, I don't think it's going to give away too much information. No. I mean, I don't think Luis changes up his sideboard plan that much anyway.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if he was playing a rug deck, some sort of rug control deck that maybe he didn't want to give away that he has like counter spells or something. But I think if you're Jund Aggro, you kind of know what's up. The only question is, Luis always saw a Domri Rad, so he knows he's not Jund. He's probably
Right.
some more creature-heavy Jund deck.
I was about to say, of all the cards to conceal Domri Raid would have been by far the most important, as that tips Luis off to exactly what Richard is, in the school of.
Yeah, so...
whereas if he hadn't seen the Domri, he might just assume he played against a Mana Screw Jund opponent and sideboard according to that.
Yeah, he's already given Luis so much information. Luis knows that he has a Domri Red, which means he's probably creature heavy. He knows he's splashing black. He knows he has Bonfire of the Dam. So those are all really important pieces of information that Luis can use to his advantage when he's sideboarding. So I don't think there's really much that Richard could have done to sort of prevent that anyway. And he can't not cast the Domri on turn 3 there. The Aristocrat wasn't even in play at that point. So.
Yeah, I agree. The game was still winnable at that point.
Definitely.
It was only the Aristocrat that made it unwinnable. Right now he counts up the damage. He is facing down 12 on the board. He's at 11, and he scoops him up.
And, again, it was a little unfortunate for Richard because he had a mulligan down to 4 cards. In general, though, I think the Aristocrat is probably favored here a little bit. Falcon Wrath Aristocrat is one of the better cards in this matchup, and Luis has actually 4 copies of Tragic Slip, which can answer the opposing Aristocrats, whereas Richard really doesn't have a way to kill an Aristocrat in his deck. He's got 4 copies of Thundermaw, which is good, but again, Falcon Wrath Aristocrat really is one of the more heavy hitters in this matchup.
Ever since these decks moved away from Lingering Souls and towards the Ground Pounders with Gather and Champion of the Parish and all that, the Thundermaw Hellkite edge that these decks that decks like Richard's used to enjoy in the matchup is significantly decreased because you're not just bricking a card when you cast your sweet 5/5 that can kill the opponent. Instead, you just keep trying to race them, and the Champion of the Parish deck is generally going to be the favorite to win a lot of races.
Yep.
Moving to the sideboard, Richard has access to a plethora of reasonable removal spells. He has 3 Devour Flesh, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Pillar Flame. He also has 2 Brimstone Volley. I don't think he'll be bringing those in as they're pretty inefficient. But he could also come in with 2 Volcanic Strengths to try and help him get through the token armies. I wouldn't be that surprised if he went with that option as well. So depending on exactly how he wants to configure himself, a ton of stuff. The Devour Flesh is obviously the more mediocre cards in the board, but Golgari Charm, Pillar Flame, and Volcanic Strength all seem like reasonable choices.
Yeah, I really like Pillar and Volcanic Strength. Again, Volcanic Strength, you might get 2 for 1, but I think it's worth it given the fact that you kind of need evasion against this deck sometimes. On Luis' side of the board, he has 2 copies of Mark of Mutiny, 2 Appetite for Brains, 3 Sin Collectors, 2 War Priest of Thrune, 1 Slayer Stronghold, 2 Obzidite Ghost Councils, 2 Doomblade, and 1 Prophet Loss. Now, again, Mark of Mutiny, I think this is kind of a card you generally want against green-based decks. It's another way for him to deal with potential Thundermaw Hellkites. But again, he might not be aware of what kind of deck Richard's playing, so he might think that Richard has Thragtusk in his deck. We know he doesn't, but either way, I think Luis is probably going to want to bring in Mark of Mutinies because generally you want them against Thragtusk decks.
Yep.
Even though Richard doesn't have Thragtusk, I still think Mark is fine because dealing with Thundermaw Hellkite or dealing with a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, it's just another way you can deal with those cards. So I kind of like Mark of Mutiny coming in. I kind of like the maybe the Prophet Loss potentially as a way to maybe, because you get the -1 to the Aristocrat, and there's not that many humans to give it +1/+1 counters.
Yeah, so I don't think he'll bring in the Prophet Loss just because he hasn't seen the Aristocrat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to put Richard on a specific deck when he's playing something a little off the beaten path like he is here. I do really like the Mark of Mutinies, though. If you think about it, it's basically like, well, they might be playing Thragtusk, and then my Mark of Mutiny will break down their defenses. Or you're like, well, they might be playing Flint of Boar, and then this card is an excellent tool in races.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty much all upside. Obviously, it's a situational card. You can easily draw it, and it's not good. But when it is good, it's very powerful against 2, opposite poles.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine as a sideboard card. You want your sideboard cards to be really high impact.
And, I agree with you. I think maybe Mark of Mutiny is probably the only card that I really would want in this matchup. I maybe shave some numbers on the Blood Artists. I don't know how effective they're going to be. I don't really want to take up in Brimstone Volleys just because it's another way you can kill Thundermaw Hellkite as well as just giving you range to go to the face. The only other question is, does he want to bring in Obzidite Ghost Council? Because again, that card is generally decent against Jund decks, so I don't think it's that great against Jund aggro, but again, you don't really know how aggressive Richard's deck is.
Yeah.
You could see a Domri Raid and a mid-rangey deck that plays Thragtusks and other cards like that, like Hunt Masters. But I think definitely Mark of Mutiny is probably going to be coming in.
Yeah, all Luis really knows is he's up against a little bit of a brew, and it's Jund colored. So he'll probably be conservative, at least, in this first round of sideboarding.
Yeah.
After all, the main deck worked pretty well for him in the first game.
Yeah, really no reason to break what's working for you. So Luis is mulliganing to 6 here. Looks like Richard is comfortable with his opening 7. We'll see if Luis feels the same about his 6. Looks like he's going through, and looks like we are good to go. So Richard is going to start out here, and he's going to lead with a stomping round. He's going to take 2 to play it untapped.
I'm predicting Arbor Elf.
Arbor Elf comes down, yes.
God, I'm good.
Could potential for a turn 1, take 2, Pillar Flames you.
Yeah, upstairs.
So
looks like he has Flint of Pour and Domri Raid in his hand. We'll see which one he actually decides to lead with here.
Interesting he kept Domri Raid in this matchup. I didn't think it'd be a card that he would really want.
Yeah, I think it's pretty mediocre. Runs right into Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, obviously. The fight is not very effective against a number of creatures in Luis's deck, namely all of them. I think it's at its best against Blood Artist, actually.
So here we go. A Flint of Pour comes down. He chooses not to play a Domri Raid and just plays a Flint of Pour, which is surprising. Like, if Domri Raid isn't even going to be played on turn 2, then how good can it be? But it's going to be pretty good here because he's going to be able to kill a Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, that decision definitely worked out for Richard here. He'll ace that Cartel Aristocrat with Domri's Neg 2 and come in for 3 more damage.
And we've seen the Aristocrats in the feature match a number of times today, and Cedric and I were talking about just how much worse the deck is when it doesn't have one of those signature Aristocrats in play.
Note that Luis has a Gather the Townsfolk in his hand. I think I would have let it in this situation. As if I drew a 3rd land, like obviously he's missing one, I can lead Gather into Zathra Necromancer, which is very strong in this matchup and in this kind of situation, whereas a Cartel Aristocrat exposed, not nearly as impressive.
Now, does he have a second Domri Raid in his hand?
So he can plus here, cast the new Domri.
That's what I'm thinking. I think you really want to just kill that Aristocrat.
Yeah, that card is bad news. It's what lets your opponent do all of the grossest things. But Richard is going to turn up the heat instead.
Yeah, because now it's interesting because he can just kill the Domri this way. But
yeah, he has gone ahead and offered up the Domri.
He's pretty low now. Luis, I think, will drop to 8 from this attack if it's not blocked. So
Richard is also, using his aggression to capitalize on Luis's mana screw. If Luis just misses another land drop, this play will probably lock the game up. It would take a fair bit for Luis to come back when Richard's threatening Goreclan Rampagers and already has a Thundermaw Hellkite in his hand. Like, at some point, that Thundermaw Hellkite will just very likely kill Luis, even if he manages to stabilize this board, which is certainly not a given.
Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised he actually played the Gather the Townsfolk, because he could have just played Doom Traveler and then potentially just tried to go for the Faithful Hour next turn.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe he has another Gather.
Yeah,
if he does, then I think that plays fine, as it's pretty mana efficient.
Looks like he just has a grip full of Xanthic Necromancers. So, yeah, I agree with you. He's in a tight spot here. It looks like no matter, even if Luis is somehow able to stabilize right now, that Thundermaw is just going to kind of end things quickly once Richard starts drawing lands. He also has a Goreclan Rampager in his hand.
He does. If he just Alpha Strikes, that should actually kill Luis. The Goreclan Rampager will turn any Flint of Pour. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He would be one short still.
Yeah,
it would turn any Flint of Pour into a 7/7, not an 8/8. So, if Luis lets 2 creatures through, he would have lethal. But I have a feeling Luis will see that coming.
Yeah, so it's still in good shape here. Yeah. Richard attacks with both the Flint of Pours. If only one of them gets blocked, he kills them. If both of them gets blocked, he can just play the Domri Raid and just kill the Aristocrat this turn.
Yep. I would expect Luis to block and sack and go ahead and give pro red, and then pro black, like, as a precaution, assuming he blocks at all. Like, if he doesn't double block, he is just immediately dead. Anyone who's been in this spot against a stomping ground, tends to realize 4 + 4, definitely problematic.
Do the math here.
And yeah, he will want to go ahead and. Oh wow, Richard really getting aggressive here. Chooses to just Rampager for not quite lethal, and play a land. Does he have?
I'm not sure if he had another play there. He could have played a Domri.
Yeah, he could have post-combat played a Domri on the Cartel. Although to be fair, if Luis doesn't sacrifice to the Cartel, then he would lose a boar in the process of using the Domri. That's fair.
Or he could have upticked to ensure that maybe if there's a creature on top of his library, he can maybe draw a land next turn for the Thunderbolt.
Yeah, that's fair. That's also
Either
good.
way, though, Richard was pretty far ahead.
There were a lot of lines, and I think almost all of them kill Luis in that spot. It's kind of debatable as to what the actual best one was.
Yeah, I agree. So both players sort of stumbled early on with mulligans, and now we have a match even up at 1-1, but Luis will be on the play now in Game 3, so if he can get that Champion of the Parish, Gather the Townsfolk draw, there's not that many things that Richard's deck can do. Richard, one, he takes a lot of damage from his own lands, and he doesn't really have a good way to mount a defense. A lot of his creatures are really good at attacking, but they're not that great at blocking.
Yeah, unlike Naya, he doesn't have an option like Unflinching Courage out of the sideboard or Boros Reckoner to stem the bleeding. He pretty much just needs to come out of the gates aggressively and keep his opponent on the defensive, because otherwise his life total's pretty easy to manipulate. And I think that's a bad place to be in this particular matchup, as Luis has both of those things. He's more aggressive, depending on his draw, and he has Blood Artist to manipulate his life total successfully.
Yeah, he just does everything better because he's more aggressive, or he can be more aggressive, and he has more removal. So
his removal is also much more efficient. Tragic Slip's pretty close to Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, and even the funny thing is that even with the mulligan there and a pretty decent start from Richard, Luis was, if he drew a third land, he was still in it because of those necromancers. I mean, he could have generated a lot of tokens there.
If he just led Gather the Townsfolk and then Cartel Aristocrat, he still could have been in that game in a huge way. Like, what's Richard gonna do? Play a Domri and fight one human token?
Yeah. Domri probably just gets uptick there.
Yeah, he just has to play a Domri and uptick, and the Cartel Aristocrat is keeping the Flint of Boars at bay because all he needs is one human buddy.
Yep.
And he can just take one down.
Yeah, so interesting to see if maybe Luis learns from his mistake in Game 2 and sort of plays things differently now, because again, that Aristocrat's so important. You really don't want to just run it out there and expose it to kind of removal. I never quite understand why the Aristocrat players will just run it out there on turn 2, given how valuable it is in that deck.
Yeah, in all iterations of the Aristocrats, I've almost always ran out any other 2-drop before the Cartel in virtually every matchup, because there's not a matchup where Cartel Aristocrat is bad. All of the other 2-drops get sided out in various situations, but Cartel Aristocrat, you literally never take him out.
Yeah, and there are definitely games where you feel like you're giving up 2 points of damage because you could have attacked if they didn't play a drop. But
that's
especially against a creature-based deck, though, it's unlikely you're going to be able to attack with your Cartel Aristocrat on turn 2. And even if you can, giving up that 2 damage for the security of having that Aristocrat in play later in the game, I think it's worth it. So even if you have to go Blood Artist instead of Cartel Aristocrat on turn 2, I think it's worth it because it just shows you, like, you need that card in play. The only times I can consider not doing it is perhaps if I have a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat in my hand.
Yeah.
But again, I agree with you. If I have a hand of Cartel Aristocrat, Gather the Townsfolk, Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, I still lead with Gather.
Yep, I think it's just generally correct. Obviously, I think that the Aristocrat decks are very, very racy decks. Like, when you miss a point of damage, it will bite you a lot of the time because, like, you're a Blood Artist deck. You get there by instances of 1 a lot of the time. Some of your games are won by Xaxes, and they feel very close because of that. So you get trained to not want to miss any points of damage. But at the same time, the deck is very capable of going long. It's one of its strengths, and Cartel Aristocrat is a big part of the long game plan.
Yeah. So both players present to shuffle, and we'll see if both players can actually keep a 7-card hand, something we have not seen in the first 2 games. Now, how do you feel like this matchup plays out in Game 3? Both players have their sideboard. It still feels like the Aristocrat's a little favored, even though Richard obviously can take out some of the weaker cards, but he looks like he kept in that Domri, and it was okay for him, I guess, that game. But again, I don't know how effective that card really is in this matchup.
I'm not a big fan of the Domri in this matchup. I hope that he decided to take it out. Obviously, he drew multiple copies in that game, and they were pretty mediocre. He basically paid 3 mana to trade a Domri with a Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah. It's possible he shaved some of those numbers and he just happened to draw the 2 that he kept in his deck.
That's true, too.
Because there's not that many cards that he has in his sideboard that I would want in here. Even Golgari Charm, I think, can be kind of mediocre at times. I think Pillar is really the only card that I definitely would want. Whereas Volcanic Strength is sort of a good card to have, but not great. Maybe the Conscripts, too, because it's another way you can deal with the Aristocrat.
Yeah, that's fair. It's tough, but it's definitely a way.
Falcon Wrath Aristocrat.
Yeah.
So here we go. Good start from Luis here. Turn 1 Champion, turn 2 Cartel Aristocrat.
And he has a 3rd land. I can see it right in his hand.
So already off to a much better start. And it looks like he's got the Necromancer as well. So it's going to be a pretty solid little army for Luis on turn 3.
I'd be pretty surprised if Richard kept a hand that doesn't have a turn 2 play of some kind here.
Yeah, he did not mulligan, I believe, too. I think he kept the 7 card. I am surprised you would keep a 7-card hand that can't interact on turn 1 or 2 against a deck like Aristocrat.
I'm surprised you would keep a 7-card hand that can't interact on turn 1 or 2 in Standard.
Yeah. It looks like he does have a Pillar of Flame, though, so he will be able to pillar something. It looks like the Champion of the Parish is going to be going away.
Yeah. I mean, it's he can target the Cartel to make it Luis's choice as to which creature dies, but that's not correct. You never want to do that. So he just goes ahead and targets correctly the Champion of the Parish.
So Richard deals with the Champion, which could potentially have been a 3-power creature this turn, but Luis still has a follow-up to the Necromancer this turn, and he's still got that powerful Aristocrat in play, so things looking decent for Luis right now, but not out of reach for Richard. Richard has a 3rd land, it looks like, and not sure what other plays he has, though. It looks like he's got a lot of lands in his hand.
Yeah, I see 2 forests and a Dragon Skull Summit, and I believe 2 copies of Falconwrath Aristocrat, plus whatever this card is.
Oh, it's Domri Red.
Yeah,
here
Domri,
it is.
not going to cut it.
It's going to be particularly bad this turn. It's basically just a 3-mana fog that can potentially draw him a card.
It's also assuming Luis actually decides to attack it. He may decline.
Yeah, he might not care.
Like, what's Richard going to do next turn? Play a Falconwrath Aristocrat and trade? Like, okay.
So, looks like he's looking to see what... It doesn't appear to be a creature, so he has to pass back.
Yeah, I think Richard was just thinking about how that card is going to affect his next turn, you know, taking a moment. A lot of players do it that way. Luis takes the safe course, kills the Domri. Another Cartel Aristocrat.
Maybe that was a bonfire of the game.
Maybe it was. It wouldn't be an especially good one.
No.
If it was.
So, Richard's going to draw his card. Yeah, yep, just lands, Arclan Rampager, and double Falconwrath Aristocrat. So, not very good against the draw that Luis has this game. Particularly because Luis has a Doomblade in his hand, so he will be able to, if Richard just plays a Rampager here as a blocker...
Yeah, that thing's dead.
That thing's going to die,
And Falconwrath Aristocrat is not known for his blocking skills. The man does not have big ups.
Although, maybe he can race here. If he just plays Aristocrat, drops Luis down to 14, he'll drop to 10. You got another Aristocrat, you drop him... I think you actually win that race.
He certainly
because
has
of
a
the
chance
Rampager.
at winning the race because of the Rampager. However, he'll obviously be ice cold to a Tragic Slip.
Yeah,
Tragic Slip will basically win the game.
But I think he has to play to his outs.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I don't think you want to play Rampager here. I think if you can try to turn the tables and be the aggressor, I think that's what John Aggro wants to do here. So I think Aristocrat's the play.
I think that's really the only
Unless
way
he has,
Richard can
it
win
looks
the
like he has a pillar. I don't even like the pillar here.
No.
I just play the Aristocrat.
Play the Aristocrat, attack for 4, next turn play another Aristocrat, and then pillar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the line here, I'm pretty sure. And, you know, it takes a little bit of guts. You know, just go for it.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes you gotta strap
No
on your
guts,
man
no
pants,
glory.
you know?
Yeah.
Just get in for all the damage.
Actually-
I see 4 lands lining up.
Did he play a land this turn? I think.
Yeah,
he did play a
played a
land this
land.
turn. So I was going to say he could put if he had a 5th mana, he could potentially win next turn. If he just goes Aristocrat, attack, pillar you, untap, get another land, attack with the Rampager. So, oh wow! So he just plays a Rampager.
Yeah.
So that is the least optimal play for him. I mean, I know what he's
Obviously,
trying to do. Yeah.
It's easy for us to say it with the benefit of being here
Yeah.
and seeing the Doomblade, but I actually think that you know, it's a Jund aggro deck, you know, like you don't have creatures that block. You have Falconwrath Aristocrats and Thundermite Hawkites and whatever. So you really do need to get your opponent to the point where they're on the defensive. And in this case, Richard, you know, loses an opportunity to do that.
I think it's mainly because you have 2 Aristocrats in your hand. That's the main reason I think I would have wanted to play the other one. Because you play the Aristocrat, suddenly, if Luis's hand is just really weak, or it's a card, it's maybe a card like Gather or Champion or something, I mean, you're still winning that race, I believe. So I think it's worth it just to try to go for it.
He wouldn't be winning the race against Gather, but he'd be winning the race against a lot of other cards.
Oh, because he could get the zombie tokens.
The Gather would turn this into a lethal clock on the next turn. He would be forced to block. Or to force to play the pillar, of course. Plays the Aristocrat.
So now he has a Pillar of Flames in his hand, but the Pillar of Flames can actually, you know, go after the Necromancer, but that'll just get sacrificed to Cartel Aristocrat.
Yep.
So he'll still generate a zombie token. He can leave the Aristocrat back to block.
he knows Luis doesn't have Gatherer or Champion of the Parish in his hand because he would have just played those cards.
Yep.
So, the pillar actually, I don't know, like, do you go upstairs with it? Is that like a real thing? If you go upstairs, put Luis to 16, attack him to 12, and then if you peel a land, you have lethal? Like, I think you go upstairs, right?
How do you have lethal, though? Because he doesn't have the Rampager anymore. Because
I'm
cast
sorry.
it last turn.
Yeah, you're right.
That was the problem. That's what we were talking about last turn. It'd be great
Well,
if
he has a land now, he can draw a Rampager.
That's
right?
true.
So that also gives you outs, but he's going to go with the other line.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't see what that does there. You're not getting rid of a creature. You're not getting rid of 2 power off the board. You're just replacing it.
I don't think we can. I don't think we can really come back from our last turn. We could have Hail Married here with the pillar upstairs, and then if we hit one of our 3 remaining Rampagers, we can kill him with the Blood Crypt that's in our hand by going to 2 life. But that leaves us dead to a lot of Luis's deck as well. Like Blood Artist kills us, for example. Brimstone Volley kills us. His own Falcon Wrath Aristocrat kills us.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of cards that Richard has to dodge. But the fact is, if he led with the Aristocrat, he wins this game.
Like, see how he's taking this defensive posture, and all he's doing is losing slower. Like, he's not actually winning.
And we said this while they were sideboarding. Jund aggro isn't good at blocking. Your creatures aren't built to block. So you want to try to turn, and you have a lot of haste creatures, and they're very effective attackers. So when you can attack with them, take your chances. You have to do the math in your head and try to figure out how is this race going to actually work for me. And unfortunately for him, there's just even a top deck Bonfire won't do anything right now.
No. It won't do enough, that's for sure.
Yeah. So unfortunately for Richard, I just don't think there's enough that he can do right now. He can play another Aristocrat as a blocker, but he's still going to have to get lucky next turn as well. And Luis still has plenty of outs that he can just lock this game up right now.
Based on how this game played out, I actually think if he had just jammed that Aristocrat and then gone Aristocrat Pillar, the game would have been his.
If he went Aristocrat Pillar, yeah, he definitely wins this game.
Luis has not cast another removal spell. I'm pretty sure his other card is not a removal spell. And at a minimum, even if it was, that he only has that 1 black source. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, he would have just definitely got him.
And obviously, it's easy for us to say this in hindsight, but the fact is, you have to put yourself in a position to win.
Yep.
And I just think that line was the best plan for Richard to actually win this game. Yep. You have to hope your opponent bricks, but it happens, and we just saw it happen. So a little unfortunate for Richard that he didn't just take the more aggressive stance there. But it's tough for players to sort of know when they have to switch up their roles. When can I be aggressive? When can I be a defensive? Especially when you're in the draw and you have nothing in play, and your opponent's been attacking you with multiple creatures. You kind of feel like, oh, I have to be defensive. I'll just play a 4/4 blocker. But in reality, it's like, well,
my deck doesn't do that.
Yeah, my deck doesn't do that. So what if I just do what my deck is supposed to do?
Yeah.
How will this work out for me? I think had he thought about it that way, he might have came across that line, did the math in his head, figured out what the play was, and because even if Luis does have a tragic slip or a way to deal with the first Aristocrat,
he was still live.
He's still live because he has a second one. Plus, he opens himself up to drawing another Aristocrat or another Rampager.